brings me great pleasure to bring on SAJJAD PARMAR, whom I met at other HR forums. And as I've mentioned, for those of you who missed what I said in the beginning, and in fact, Sajjad didn't hear this, when Sajjad presented at the previous, at the earlier forum when I first met him, you know, he is really content heavy, and I don't undermine the effort that he put in. And I was saying, whoa, we really need him here, because he's able to give a very all-rounded view, in addition to what I've said, all right, in addition. Sajjad is a business and people leader with over 2 decades of not local but global HR and total rewards experience, having worked for companies like Unilever, GSK, and eBay. He has led and developed some of the most progressive HR and total rewards interventions and programs for his company using data and tech tools. Wow, so futuristic. His mission for the Talent Accelerator is to help companies perform better, optimize costs, and maximize employees' performance by strengthening the HR capability in data analytics, so needed, yeah, and raising the standards of total rewards. Yay! Professionals like us will be so happy to hear that. Now, his learning programs are very hands-on, based on a case study approach that are centered on real-life challenges. At work, Sajjad is ruthless about execution. I know, I saw his deck, you know, it is like fantastic. And also he is ruthless about time management and believes that the best solution is usually the simplest way. Oh my gosh, I have a first-hand experience collaborating with him. I can attest to everything that is said here in the last statement for sure. So today he is going to share his perspective as a CEO, as a hiring manager, business owner, HR consultant on how you can measure your market worth. All right, and on that, I would just like to pass the floor to Sajjad. Welcome again, Sajjad.
Thanks, Aline. I'm really excited to be here. I was listening to your section, and I was like, I think you've already spoken about almost everything that I wanted to cover. So there's not much for me to share.
No, don't mention.
But I think before I share the slides that I prepared, as I was listening through it, and I think you were very spot on in terms of that. While we can figure out a structure to measuring your market worth, sometimes it's not easy, right? There are many factors at play here, right? So let me share 2 perspectives with you, and then we can drill a little bit deeper, right? So there is a concept in HR we like to call an employer versus an employee's market, all right? And please remember that because I think that comes in very handy. An employer's market is where the economy, the number of jobs are less and there are more people, all right? So the employers get to decide who they want to hire, when they want to hire, and how much they want to hire on, right? So think about the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. Think about COVID, unfortunately. Think about if there is the recession, for example, right? This could be entire market-led. This could be industry-specific as well. So that's the other factor at play, right? After the financial crisis, obviously the entire market was disrupted.
Yeah.
We also had a couple of years where the oil and gas industry suffered like anything. If you remember, the oil prices almost went down, I think, to zero.
Yeah.
And so that the entire industry and thousands of jobs were impacted.
Yeah, the air travel, right?
Exactly.
When air travel grind to a halt.
Exactly. It doesn't matter how amazing you are, there are just no jobs, right? COVID, if you think about the airline industry, the hospitality industry, and so many other industries, it doesn't matter how good you are, there are just no jobs, right? E-commerce and tech, on the other hand, it doesn't matter whether you're good or not, they were just jobs. And as you probably are seeing in the tech industry, there was a lot of overhiring, right? And tech industry in the last 10 years, for good or bad reasons, has been doing well. They were throwing money, they were hiring people, right? And to Eileen's point, you might be low competency, but you got good pay. You were just at the right place at the right time, right? So that's the employer's market. employees market is where the economy is robust. I always feel Singapore to an extent has always been more of an employees market because it's a true global regional headquarter. It's a fantastic economy. There are always good jobs in the market, right? And for many jobs and many functions, the employees get to drive what kind of compensation they want, right? Of course, I'm really overgeneralizing it, right? Not every job you can just say, oh, this is what I want and you will get. But I would say that it's to an extent an employees market, right? The other factor I'd like to share with you here is that in the last, I would say post-COVID, in the last 18 to 24 months, some of the observations I've had and some of the discussions I've had with other leaders as well, is that we're really moving into what we call a specialized economy, what we call a skills-based economy, right? That means that the generalist jobs and skill sets, I'm not saying that they're not handy or useful, but the kind of troubles we are seeing in the world, the kind of problems we're seeing in the world, the kind of business challenges we're seeing in the world require really in-depth experience. So you take any function for that matter, and the kind of expertise needed, right, is on a different level altogether, right? And so therefore, if you link that to your market worth, one of the best ways to increase your market worth is to be an expert at something, right? And I'm just simplifying it to that extent, right? One of the personal experiences I can share with you over the years is that one of the benefits I got in my career and in my years is that I just spent donkey years doing total rewards, right? And total rewards has always been a skill set that's always been required, that's always been appreciated in a market like Singapore or in Asia, for example. Within HR, it's one of the, I would say, lesser famous or well-known functions.
Yes.
And what that has meant is that there are few people like me in a market like Singapore or Asia who've done 15, 20 years, And so if you look at just total reward jobs right now in the market, there are more jobs and less people.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
And I coach and I mentor, the young professionals that I do. And I always say that the first 8-10 years of your life are all about building depth, right? As you move, in your life, age-wise and maturity-wise and career-wise, you're expected to be good at something. That good is the expertise you have in whatever area that you're in. It doesn't matter what it is, right? So I think that's one aspect that I want to share with you, because part of the market worth, and exactly Ali shared before, is around what are you good at? What do you bring to the table, right? And sometimes actually, even though we feel that, we need to have a good, company brand name on the resume, it doesn't matter. If you're doing a good job, if you have a challenging job, it stretches you, it helps you learn. We have this concept of 70-20-10 in HR, which is 70% of your learning is on the job. Yeah. You can go to the best training in the world, you can get the best trainer for yourself, but ultimately on the job, if you're not learning, then all of that is not going to impact, right? Where you want to learn, you're spending 8-12 hours a day, months and months and years in a job. What you want is to be able to learn, to have that stretch, to have that breadth and depth in that job. And if you continue to do that over year and year, you are going to become an expert, right? And your market worth is going to keep going up because you're becoming awesome at that job. So that's the first perspective.
Just to interject here, because you reminded me of this phrase, right? Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. Yeah. But in terms of compensation, your value is in the eyes of the employer.
Yeah, exactly. Then the second concept, which is, I guess, more personal to us as individuals and employees, is what we call push versus pull factors, right? And what that means is that what are the reasons that are pushing you to leave your company, or what are the reasons that are pull factors or pulling you towards another employee or another job. It could be pay related, of course, and most of the time it's pay related. It could be job related. It could be a bad boss. It could be horrible company culture. It could be there are just so many amazing jobs out there. I hope that's the case. That you're like, okay, why do I need to, stay there? I want to explore.
That would be a pull factor, right?
That would be an awesome pull factor.
Awesome, yeah.
And exactly to what again Eileen said before that, and I do strongly feel that's the case right now. You don't want to spend too much time in one company. I think in today's time, the diversity of work, the speed with which things are changing, to an extent, your market worth is also dependent on how diversified your experience is. So you're an expert in one area, but if you worked in 4 different industries, I guarantee you your market worth is more. Because you understand and you have operated in 4 very different environments. You have managed 4 different kind of stakeholders. Each business, even in the same industry, has very different challenges, right? So when companies are looking for talent, right, expertise is one part of the equation, but they're also looking at how much experience, how much diversified experience are you bringing to the table, right? Because as an employer, when I'm hiring, right, when I've hired for my companies and I've interviewed people, of course, the expertise and all of that is something that I check. But I'm also looking at that if I bring this person who's worked in 5 different industries, right? They have 5 different perspectives they can bring, and they can add value to my company, you know? And therefore, when I look at that experience and that value, I am more open to paying more because I know that stands for something.
And the thing is that that extra more sometimes it's not being articulated. I think we are fortunate because we are behind the scenes, so we get to see the justification, how the recruiter, the talent acquisition, specialist say, no, I really want this talent, and then hiring manager say, I really want this talent, because the additional bits, but the professional, sometimes they don't get that kind of feedback.
Absolutely. So I think, and again, at different stages in life, we have a different combination of push-pushes, 4 factors. I'll share one personal, one of my life-changing, probably that changed, I guess, the trajectory of my career. In my first company, I spent 11 years. Unilever, for those of you know, is one of the largest consumer companies in the world. Right. I would also say from an HR perspective, very highly progressive. I would probably rate it as a top 2%, from an HR perspective. And, when I actually just moved to Singapore, the first 3.5 years were absolutely hugely challenging for me. And the financial crisis had just happened, and I was really desperate to move out. I must have given like 50 interviews. I could not land a job. It was horrible for me. And then things changed, and in 15 months, I couldn't be more happier. I did not want to leave the company. I had been in the company for 11 years. And again, the market changed drastically in a matter of a few months. And at one point in time, I had 4 offers, right? And I was like, obviously, best place to be in. But I had no push factors. There was no reason for me to leave Unilever because, again, 11 years, exactly, pay was okay. My team knew me. I was doing well. Feedback was fantastic. But then you have these pull factors and you're like, okay, what do I do? And I decided to leave the company, even though I was very happy. And I think that's probably the best decision I've made professionally by moving into another industry, into another role, and like I said, that's always going to be your challenge is, how do you balance your push versus pull factors? Sometimes the push factors are more, so it's an easy decision. Sometimes pull factors are more, right? And so you might be happy, you might be content. And again, money is not everything. You have family situations, flexibility. I've spoken to a couple of friends who are like staying in the job because the flexibility they get to manage their families, time zones, work-life balance is a lot more than the amount of money they can make. Yeah. So I would say that's never like a very balanced equation, but at different points in time, you will have that choice when it comes whether you want to move out because of the pull factors or you just have to get out because there are too many push factors. The other thing before I get into the slides I have to share is that there I would say 2 things that stand out for me when I think about, when we price for people, when we price for talent, when we meet talent and how the market views it. And I would say that, and this is something I learned from one of my bosses who's a great friend now about 10, 12 years back. And the phrase he used was, your network is your net worth.
Oh, yes.
I'll repeat that. Your network is your net worth, right? Yeah. In today's time, it is massively important that you are absolutely amazing in your job. You are the expert. There's nobody like you, but nobody knows you in the market, right? It is going to take you, and it is going to be difficult for you to stand out, right? Yeah. And like if you go to LinkedIn and if you look at some of the jobs and how many people are applying, 80, 100, 200 people are applying for the same job. Like, of course, your resume has to stand out and everything has to go well. The other way in today's time, which actually is probably equally better or sometimes even more effective, is what kind of network do you have, right? Yeah. If you stand out, your network will know you. they will put in a good word for you. I know so many of my colleagues and friends have gotten jobs because somebody recommended them, right?
Absolutely.
That will only happen if you're out in the market, you are building connections, right? And people know what you stand for, what kind of expertise you have, right? And to that extent, exactly. And the balancing side of that is, I would say, very strong communication. There are people who are really experts, but they cannot communicate. And whether we like it or not, we are living in a world where communication matters, right? Even in interviews, we see sometimes that the person is absolutely amazing. There's depth in experience. They work for amazing companies, but they can't speak well. Like they sometimes struggle to articulate what they're thinking, what they're trying to answer. And I'm not saying that's going to go against you against a good resume. It just adds on if you can also communicate well, right? And again, you don't know who the recruitment person is, who the line manager is. Communication is always going to be important. Cool. And the last one I would say, which is personally for me that stands out when I interview people, is what kind of authenticity and how genuine you are when you go for an interview. Okay. And for people who have done hundreds and thousands of interviews, I will tell you that this will be very evident. If you try to be not yourself and you try to make up, it's very clear. It's evident in 5 minutes. I would highly recommend whoever you are, however you are, be genuine, be authentic in your interviews. Don't try to make up. It comes out very clearly. So as you go and you figure out, and that's part of the market worth, right? I know for companies, like especially I can talk for some of the more progressive companies, they want you to be yourself. They actually want that. You don't need to try too hard. Just bring yourself to the table and it will sell.
Yeah, I think there was a question about what does the career counselor or coach do, especially, in general. I'm just going to say in general, usually that would include the point that SAJJAD mentioned, because learning to articulate, it doesn't only belong to those who are very outspoken. Even quiet achievers can learn how to articulate by scripting it out, making sure the sentences are nicely formed, and don't have to use bombastic words, and say it where it doesn't sound too fabricated. Because sometimes we don't practice, we don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful.
Just like we practice for our presentations, same things. In fact, I just met a friend of mine yesterday, and I was just telling her that. She's like, oh, she's got a good job. She's happy. But I was like, okay, the market is good. Like, have you tried to even explore? And and she was like, no. I'm like, you got to keep your interview skills practicing, So just go for an interview here and there. You got to practice your interviews as well. And, like I said, you get better at something when the more you practice. So again, not for the sake of practicing, but yes, even before you go on the interview, research about the company. Know about the company. I know employers appreciate candidates who come in a bit prepared. Like they know about the company, they ask insightful questions.
Yeah.
Interview is not just about you answering. It's your opportunity to tell them that you've done your research, you understand what's needed, you have some questions. Employers do appreciate that. People who bring initiative to the table. And if you think about the navigating the salary landscape, right? Things honestly could not be easier than they were probably maybe 12, 15 years back, right? With the advent of social media and all these platforms. And so if you think about like the 7 points I have here, and I think you mentioned this as well, that, you have now like public platforms where you can actually get a sense of, what pay is there for certain jobs. Glassdoor, PayScale, LinkedIn Salary, a number of, headhunting firms, they have their own websites and they do indeed, and even job sites, they do indicate roughly what the pay package is. Now, you might not get it extensively, but it's good enough for you to start to understand what kind of role and what kind of pay is associated with that. So I think I would say that leveraging online salary databases, is a good starting point. Even certain industry-specific reports are available, right? In Singapore, I know that there are a couple of public reports that I think the government publishes around, what the pay is. I know for a number of years, I used to get what the fresh graduate salary is. Every year, I think the government publishes a report, And so, if there are any industry-specific reports, professional association reports, which are public, please absolutely, get them. It's just to give you an indication. They're not going to be wrong. They might be 70-30 plus minus, but at least it's a starting point. Number 3, which I already shared, look, your network is going to tell you, will help you. If you're part of certain forums, professional forums, you're going to get an indication. I think Eileen also mentioned that through your network, if you have certain people, they will be able to guide you. Your coaches and mentors absolutely will be able to help you and guide you. Especially mentors, their job is to actually help you and answer your certain questions. So if you have a mentor in your field, right, who's a lot more experienced, who has a good reach, they'll actually be able to give you perhaps even specific idea and specific details around, what the market rate is, where you are, right? And it is not always necessary that we're underpaid. It could be that we're paid okay. It could be that we're overpaid, right? But to have that understanding is important. As you consult with recruiters and HR professionals, obviously when you go for interviews, when you apply, sometimes I think we share. They ask you what your salary is, and I would say that whenever that's happening, that's always a good indication.
Yeah.
Whether your salary is on spot, whether it's above or below, because if your salary is higher than or on around the budget that they have, they will tell you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do unfortunately know sometimes where they go all the way to the final interview and then they come back and say that they can't afford you, which is quite sad. But I would say that when you are in the process, you should as a practice share what your package is and ask them if this works for them, rather than spending 4 interviews and waiting for 2 months. Make it very clear that this is your expectation and this is where your salary is, and ask if they can make it work. So you can save your time and you can save their time as well. And I think that's one way you can find out what the market rate for certain jobs is. I already talked about job sites. All the headhunting job sites in Singapore as well, whether it's a government board, it's JobDB, JobStreet, all the other ones. Even I would say that there are some large recruitment firms who have their own websites and they publicize the jobs they're looking after. And in many cases, they will actually publicize the salary range as well, right? And so you can get a good indication there as well. And I think there is a thing to be said around the location and the size of the job, right? Business titles can be very misleading, right? It might be, for example, called a marketing director role, but it's for a very small company, right?
Yeah.
So just because it's a director title, it does not mean the salary is going to be high, right?
Yeah.
And compare that to if you go and start working for, I don't know, a huge, let's say Google, right? You might be a manager title in Google, but a manager is already a very senior role in Google, right? And so it could still be driving a higher pay, right? So you got to figure out the company, the size of the company and the size of the role, right? Like I said, business titles can be very lead in. For example, I remember growing up in banks, like even junior titles are called VPs, right? And I was like, oh my God, VP role. Oh my God, that must be like amazing, big role. But
but it's not. Yeah.
Exactly. It's actually a junior role in the banking industry, right?
Yeah.
So again, titles are misleading. So that's where you need to find out about the company, the size of the role, who does the role report to, what kind of impact you have on the role, and all of this. And again, you're not going to become an expert overnight. You do this a few times over a few months, you start to get a hang of how salaries move around in your industry and in your jobs.
I think I really like that last point. A manager and another manager may not be doing the same kind of work because of their remit, the scope under management, like the number of people under management, what is their span of control, stuff like that. Everything matters, and for very mature job meaning to say the job has been around, the HR has been improving on the job description or job advert. And that kind of job advert sometimes is very specific. They only want people with like 12 years experience managing a group of no less than 100 people in direct reporting line. So wow, that you straight away know that your compensation will be marked to market. Yeah, because it's so specific, right?
Absolutely. And I don't know if I've actually added this. I'll talk about this later. Okay, so let me move forward first. And when you think about the salary negotiation, because it's part of like your market worth, right? So like I said, the research I've already talked about all the things in the last slide, right?
Yeah.
And I think you already talked about building your case. This is very important, right? Like
Yeah.
your expertise and your achievements are going to ultimately drive your negotiation. If
Mm-hmm.
the company sees the value you bring to the table, and that's the kind of expertise that they need, right? Then that will
Yeah.
really build your case, because that's when the negotiation starts. They might say we want X and you say you want Y, and they're like, oh, we can't afford. And it doesn't mean that you can convince them to your number, but at least you have a case that you can say, hey, by the way, I'm asking for this because A, I know what the market pays, but B, this is what I bring to the table, right? And so that's linked to the next one, which is the art of the conversation. You don't say,
Yeah.
oh, if you don't pay me, then I'm sorry, I'm not joining, right? It doesn't work like that, right? You
Mm-hmm.
always want to keep your bridges there, but it's about how do you negotiate, and what you want is a win-win. Tell them that you're willing to negotiate a little bit, you're willing to come down a little bit if they are able to increase a little bit, right? Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
can't, maybe they can't do a salary increase. Maybe there are some other elements of the package that they can look into, right? I know that, over the past 3 to 4 years, especially after COVID, a lot of companies have invested in improving their benefits, right? If you are somebody who has a family, who have kids, who might have older parents, a lot of companies I know are re-looking at benefits, right? Because benefits landscape has changed drastically, right? The medical costs obviously continues to go up, right? And so companies are now looking into like more innovative ways of helping employees, right? Indirectly, they might not increase your base pay, but they might help you with a really, really nice benefits package.
That
They
is
might give
music
you a
to
cash sign-on.
all our ears. Very nice,
Yeah,
Sajjad. Music to all our ears. Yeah. Costs
yeah.
have gone
So
up,
exactly,
taking
yeah.
care of
So
3 generations at home. My gosh.
exactly. So they might, like,
Nice.
I know a lot of companies have started to look at what we call flex benefits, which is like they might allow you to top up your insurance, they might allow you to top up your medical expense, so on and so forth, right? So I
Good to
mean,
hear.
salary is one thing, and to that extent, I would say that salary is obviously very, very important, very, very important. But look at
Mm.
the overall package, right?
Yeah.
Are there any incentives? What kind of benefits do they offer, right?
Mm.
You might get. I know, in fact, I was just talking to one of my mentees, and she was telling me that she got an offer. The pay is better, but she was very disappointed because currently she gets like 25 days off, and she's going to go to 14 days. And to her
Mm.
personally, she's a bit young, and she's like
Mm.
that. I've agreed for personal reasons to move, but that sticks to her because she can only take 14 days off, right, versus 25 days right now. So
Yeah,
like I
that's
said,
too real.
so think about all the full piece of things,
Mm.
and then, like I said, put that as part of the conversation, building your case, negotiating why you need something and why should they be making a case for you, right? And
Mm.
then flexibility and creativity and compensation. I think that links me back to what I talked about, the push and the pull factors, right? You will negotiate on some things, you will not negotiate on some things. So you have to
Mm.
be very sure that what are the push factors that are forcing you to leave this job, right? If it's purely salary, then of course it's different. But if there are other factors where the work-life balance is crap, the job itself is not exciting, you're not learning, you've been in the job for too long, the boss is,
Politics.
whatever, politics exactly, you don't see any career growth,
Oh.
you might be like, okay, I might move on the same pay.
Mm.
I know. I'll give you an example. In Korea, in one of the companies I worked for,
Right.
our company was the company to work for in the tech sector. I
Okay.
know for a fact that they were. I mean, I actually came across packages where candidates were like, we're ready to take a pay cut to join the company,
I
right?
know. Such a
Because the
strong
brand
brand
name,
name.
exactly, the brand name, the culture is in the
Yeah.
tech industry was best in the market, right? They
Right,
just
right,
wanted to
right.
get in, right? So
Right, right, right.
you have before you go into negotiation, you have to know what your reasons are, where you're ready to make concessions, where you're not, where you will not negotiate, for example, and that will just make your life easier when you're into that conversation and when you're trying to bring flexibility and even creativity in your negotiation. And again, lastly, navigating pushbacks. Like if the company comes and says, "Hey, by the way, we just can't increase salary," right?
Oh,
You
okay.
have to basically use all of these points and say, "Okay, what else can you do for me?" If you are really desperate to move out, let's say, God forbid, I hope that's
Mm.
not the case, but if you're really desperate to move out, you try and get into a win-win. Like what else can you get? And I'm sorry to point this out, but I'm using my 20 years of experience. Most of the female candidates that I've worked with, all my female friends and colleagues, females don't generally negotiate well. So let me put it out there.
Wow.
You
confirm that, right? You confirm that, right? Oh
Yes,
my
I
God.
can
Hey,
confirm.
female audience, go forth with confidence.
Yes,
Thank
please
you.
ask and negotiate your market worth. It doesn't mean be difficult, but you have
Yeah,
every
I know.
right. And I'll give you again one scenario.
Yeah.
We were doing this coaching session with our female employees in my last company, and we had about 17 females in the room, right? And it was only for our female audience. So we had my talent partner, and we were asking certain questions around interviews and all. And I was like, okay, so when you joined our company, right?
Yeah.
How many of you negotiated for the pay? And believe it or not, that only 2 out of 17 negotiated on pay. 15 accepted the salaries that was offered for them. Now, thankfully for me, I know that we are
nice
always
people. We are
right?
nice people.
I know that. Yeah, I know. I know that we
No,
pay
that doesn't
fair,
help. Yeah.
but I know that the world is not fair. Let me be just brutal about this. The companies are not fair. In many, unfortunately, local family-owned businesses, there is exploitation of pay. My point being, you have every right to negotiate, but you will only be able to negotiate and come to a win-win if you understand what your market worth is. If you've done the research, you know what is your push factor and pull factors, where you're ready to make concessions, where you're ready to push. Ultimately, look, your decision is always yours. But if you have all this ready with you, it'll just make your decision making for yourself much easier.
Yeah.
And I just want to balance off, because I know that employers' side of things sometimes is like a black box. Even employees within the company sometimes don't understand how companies use compensation. It's not transparent. I'll be the first one to tell you, in many companies, HR is not transparent, and I apologize for that. And again, I'm not going to justify all these 4 things, but the company always has a budget, right? And I would say there are many industries who are very, very sensitive to cost, right? So if you think about industries who don't make a lot of profit just because in the industry they are in, they are very conscious about cost. And I will also tell you, there are industries who pay well, there are industries who don't pay well. It's very evident. There are certain industries who just can't pay well because they can't afford to pay well. So budget is always a concern, right? Of course, performance and potential. I think performance and potential speak through your expertise, through your experience, through your resumes. When you go for an interview, it will show, it will shine through, right? I think benchmarking against the market is obviously something that every company does, right? And companies will be open to pay you a premium if that value is clear, right? I would also add, and I think I talked about this earlier, that we're living in a skills-based economy, and we're moving into it. In fact, I think Western countries are actually moving very fast towards there. What skills-based pay is that we might be the same function, right? We are all in HR, for example, but let's say that learning and compensation actually is driving a premium in the market.
Yeah.
Right. So that benchmark is going to also impact the kind of salaries that's going to be offered to you, right? If you are in a function where within that function your expertise is niche, or your expertise is highly valued or highly regarded, then that is going to actually help you versus the market benchmarks available, right? And then, total compensation philosophy. There are companies that know for a fact, they will say that we just want to pay average. We will never be able to pay higher. We'll do differentiation, yes. But the target pay is at the middle of the market, which is for most companies. I know for a fact there are industries that say that for business reasons, we will always be below the market, right? And then they come up with, like I said, bonuses and benefits and other options to make up for that. So again, from a package and negotiation perspective, salary, yes, is probably the most important element. But like I said, all of us are in different stages in our life. We get to a stage where we start thinking about retirement, we start thinking about benefits, and all of those things. So think about the entire package and take that into the negotiation. And just to wrap up, like I said, negotiation is not negotiation if it's not informed, because you're just shooting in the dark. If you have your data, if you understand how the market works, if you understand your personal reasons, push or pull, then that's an informed negotiation. And whatever the outcome is, you are always going to be satisfied with whether it went your way or it didn't go your way, because you are basing your decision on facts, on figures. You've already thought through it. all of what I've shared, I mean, it's evident that it's a holistic approach, right? I mean, it takes time. You think through, you talk to your family members, you think about, like I said, the push and the pull factors, and it just makes for a more holistic approach. And I always feel that if you go into the negotiation with a sort of a win-win scenario, not just for yourself but for the company as well, generally in my experience, it actually helps you. It helps your negotiation as well, because I've seen candidates who are like, "Oh, I'm not going to accept this. You take it or leave it." And in good companies, they'll be like, "Okay, you leave it. We're also not going to be pushed back." But if you go in and the negotiation is more mutual benefit, it's a win-win, then you will find that there will be a lot of recruiters and managers who will be willing to actually make an exception for you as well, right? If you're the right candidate, they will also try to see what they can do for you. So I've just summarized these, whatever I've shared into these 3 points.
I think the informed negotiation one is something that professionals, if they don't know or have some idea of how the HR operate, because every company is different, but by and large, we're trying to share with them, that there are, no matter how minimally, there's still some calibration, right? I think this part is a very important takeaway to not just do the due diligence in a one unilateral direction, just one direction. It has to be bilateral, like talking to people, verifying the reports, what you read, what you gather. Perhaps that might help. I think this is a good reminder.
That's pretty much what I had to share. I hope that was helpful in terms of just some pointers that you can keep in mind. Happy to I know we have some questions that were sent earlier.
Yes. We definitely have questions, and I think I took the liberty to write something, and I was hoping that you can chime in as well. So let me just ask the first one. I think the question is, will asking for a lower salary actually, downplay you? Yeah, that's number one question. Maybe you can see, What do you think?
Well, I guess it's not natural, I would say. It's not intuitive. Why would you ask for a lower salary? But let's say if you have very genuine reasons for asking for a lower salary, let's say it's the brand name that you want to work for, right? And you do have an offer with them, and you're like, okay, like an example I gave, you're happy to take a pay cut to join them, right? So you're solving for a very specific, problem that you have, or whatever the solution that you're looking for. I would say that yes, to an extent, if you take a lower salary, all realistically, it does again, level you down, because when you apply, you work in this company after taking a pay cut for 3-4 years, and you apply again, your previous high salary is not going to matter. This is how the world works, right? Because again, when you think about the budgets, the roles, everything, you are going to be linked to the last salary that you were drawing. So if you take a pay cut, then it's going to impact.
Okay, I think the adjoining question to that would be, what about if your reference point are all contract roles, where 5 years before is a full-time role? That's where the higher paying amount comes in.
Yeah, I would still say, based on my experience, it will still be your last drawn salary.
Okay. And actually, they are not really losing out, because contract roles has their own scope as well, right?
Yeah, correct. That's correct.
They can do a little prorated kind of thing. I mean, in a very rough form, right? Because that role is at that level, and therefore the expectation is tied to that level. And therefore, I think the more we equip the professionals with the right language to use, that might actually open the doors, maybe.
Let me also qualify by saying that when I think about what we call skills-based pay, and I also want to add this, that I think Singapore hopefully is going to get there eventually. If you think about, and I don't know how many of you know what's happening in the US in terms of salary, but salary ranges are becoming public, right? So for example, in California, you cannot ask a female employee what their current pay is, and as of 1st January, I don't know, this year or last year, I keep forgetting, maybe this year, any job in New York actually has to publish what the salary range is. Right? And a lot of Western countries are moving into this. So what I'm trying to say is that we might get into a point where your last salary starts to matter less because you now know what the range of the salary is, of the job is. And so they have to pay you within that, irrespective of what you are doing earlier.
Yeah, yeah. I think they actually did it last year, or maybe the end of this year. I remember there was a time where all the managers were scrambling as well because they are saying, oh no, especially those who are underpaid. They went, oh no, what am I going to do? You know, I'm not ready to take on the salary questions, and they have to equip themselves. Yeah. Okay. And then there's also a question. Now, if their last drawn is below the salary range, do HR, this is a separate question, which is, do HR have a problem with like, you know, wow, you're going to have a huge hike in your salary. Can we you know, like scale it down? Do they have problem with that where the hike is too big?
Based on my experience, I would say multinational companies, they have very strong structures. Okay, so they will not hire you less than their minimum. Let me give you an example. Let's say the market value for a role is $100 a month. Okay, and multinational companies, I will tell you from example, depending upon what you are, they will not hire you less than 70 or 80. 80 is usually 75, 80 is usually the minimum. Let's say you're getting 50, for example, right now. Right?
Yeah.
If the company has that policy that they will not hire less than 75, they will pay you 75. Even that means that that's like a 50% jump for you, but they're going to do that, right? Unfortunately, in many family-owned businesses and local businesses, that's not the case.
Yeah.
They will look at, okay, I'll give you 20% in Singapore market. That's already a good increase. I'll bring you to 60, and that's good enough. So I do want to make that differentiation that where that's the case. I would, in fact, also make the differentiation between public listed companies and private listed companies, right? Because in public listed companies, the governance is a lot higher. They cannot get away by paying a lot lower than the market, right? Because there are audits and all of these. So please remember the distinction, MNC versus local companies, but also private versus public listed companies.
That's a very, very strong point. Thank you so much for highlighting this. Because sometimes we take it for granted that everybody knows this. But it's good to highlight, because there are cases, you know, where the incumbents really get their salary jacked up because they're part of they cannot be an outlier. You know, if they're an outlier, you know, the likes of the job that you did in the past, Sajjad, as a comment ban, you are in trouble because you can't explain why is that dot out there, you know, and how are you going to answer to your shareholders, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's very cool. I think there was a question from from Hui Hong. I mean, since we are on the chat, and I'll come to those pre-asked questions. For those who are retrenched, from your experience, Sajjad, will these people be at a disadvantage? Let's talk about
not at all. I would say
like the layoffs, the recent spate of layoffs, right?
I shared on my LinkedIn post that I've since my first year in my career, back from 2002, I've been seeing layoffs happening every year in my life in the companies I've worked for. Big ones, small ones, they happen every year. And I will tell you, I know the tech industry is new, so it's a little bit more out there. But any company, this is part of the process. This is part of the business. It does not put you at a disadvantage at all. In fact, I will tell you from personal experience, 80% of the people that I've known who have unfortunately been laid off, ultimately it actually helps them in the long run.
Okay, cool. And I think there's a certain window, isn't it? Because your relevance, right? There's a certain window. Within the first year, it's still acceptable. And then if we can articulate what has kept you busy, that might help also, right? There's a question from Beer Joy. Beer says, I've been out of the market for almost 20 years. How should I position myself in terms of market value? Well, some background. She used to be a financial planner and planning to go into data analytics, probably, you know, after picking up that skills and all that stuff.
I would say, look, I think it depends on what kind of experience you had before, right? So whether you worked 5 years, you worked 20 years before you had this break, right? So that's probably the starting point for me. Like if you look at your resume, let's ignore the break that you had. When you left your last job, what kind of experience and skill sets and all of that you had. I would say that should be your starting position, right? It could be that puts you at the more junior levels, all right? That's one thing. It could be that puts you at the more senior or mid-level. That's one thing. But I would say that whatever experience you had, you have to start there. Now, of course, in terms of your in the market right now, in terms of technology, in terms of data, in terms of control, in terms of all of these things have changed quite a bit in 20 years, right? So I think one of the things you have to think about, and probably you have to do a little bit of work, is to figure out how much has changed in your area between where you were and where you are right now. I can tell you there are jobs which have not changed in 20 years. What we were doing 20 years back, it's pretty much the same, right? And there are jobs where the 20 years before, the world has changed completely. It's not even there anymore. They've completely transformed themselves.
I really like what you have mentioned, even though you're not actively doing the job, but you have kept in touch with what happened and in the market. And also, you could explain a little more about knowledge. That means you kept in touch. Skills, maybe you are picking up some skills here and there. We try to turn all of that into something meaningful. That means you're not totally rusty, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, again, if you, whatever job you did, whatever work you did was really robust, the expertise you built for whatever time you did was good. And if you can bring that again in your interviews and your interactions, I think it's not going to be, I'm not going to say it's not going to be a challenge because the break is long. But like I said, the starting point is where you left off. What was your profile? How much work did you do? What kind of experience did you have? And is that relevant in the market right now, in the industries and the companies that you're looking to apply for? If you can bring that on, I think it shouldn't be that bad.
Okay, very good. Is it okay not to provide 3-month salary slip and provide just how much the CPF contribution is on the salary? They can also work
I think that really depends on the company's, I guess, need. If company says I want, then you have to provide. I don't think there's really much you can do. So I don't think CPF alone. If the company says I need, and again, look, there are companies who need this for governance purposes, right? So there is a process that we have to follow. A company says I need them for documentation, for proof, and then you just have to provide.
Right. Okay. I think that last part, to me, there is no sure win thing. You can throw the rule book. You can say you're not supposed to ask me this and all that stuff. But then that's my view. We are just introducing a lot more obstacles.
Yeah, agree.
Right? And and I think the situation depends on the party that you're negotiating with as well. Not all HR are like you and I, but with a little knowledge, and that's my intent of this webinar, is to instill upon you some knowledge over there, like what's happening behind the scenes. Yeah.
No, but the other thing I would say is that, personally as well, when I do offers, and I like to see documentation. It's not because I don't trust them. It's because my own governance and my own. I don't want anybody ever, if I leave the company and says, oh, but you offered that person, but we couldn't find like, where you got the number from. So for my own self, I want the proof, I want documentation, because it just makes me, I'm happy that way that we've done our work.
For me, is coming from background of, being subjected to a lot of audit, end of the year is always the auditor asking,
exactly.
Did you make an exception? Where do you plug the numbers and all that?
Exactly.
It's always that. So there are some internal compliance thing as well. And so this other question is, I think you have answered the first question, which was the early question, not from the live audience, which was pre-given. How does my previous salary matter if it is a part-time job, right? Yeah. So I think you have partially responded to that, isn't it? And if it is a part-time job, remember, it's only part of your full-time job, which means you can either do a correlation and then calculate from there.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think this is the same as another audience question. How to broach the question by employers on current salary amount if the last drawn is on the last drawn pay, and when is it okay to disclose?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Can you?
How do I answer if the employers ask about the current salary amount, and at which stage of the interview process should they disclose?
I would say that do it as early as possible. Like I said, I was explaining earlier. And in fact, I would say that if, let's say you apply for a job and somebody calls you, right? And they say, okay, we found your interview and we would like to interview. I would say that go ahead and ask them that this is what your salary is. Or if you don't want to share your salary, say, this is my expectation. Does that even work for you? Right? Like I said, I've seen far too many times. In fact, my very good friends, they go to the last stage after 2 months, 6 interviews, and then they say, oh, sorry, you're too expensive. Or we can't, our budget is not going to allow that. You don't want to spend all that time. So, be transparent. Tell them this is what your expectation is. If they then ask you, okay, how much do you get? You say, I get 100, but I want 120. Make it as early as possible so it's clear. And also, if they don't object, you also know that means that your number is okay.
Yeah. I like that because I adopt that strategy. Okay, the reason why is there's an alternate thought to it as well. I don't want it to be an excuse that they can throw back.
Fair enough.
I rather address it upfront. Yes, it saved me time, but I also don't want that to be an area where it's not addressed. Then the other side can always use it as an excuse to say, okay, all the discussion stop here because, it's my fault. I should have asked you this. Stuff like that. So no, let's call the elephant out in the room. It saves everybody time. And if they say no, you know where you stand. You know where you stand, right? Yeah. How to research using reliable sources to better understand your market value? Reliable. I think the keyword is reliable.
Look, I would say that probably the most, if you say reliable, I would say you need to talk to people. Like I said, the industry reports are very overly generalized, right? So, if it says the average is 100, somebody could still be getting 20, somebody could still be getting 200, right? 100 is very overly generalized. If you want reliable, I think you got to talk to people, you got to build your network. You talk to recruiters, like I said, you look at the numbers advertised for jobs, right? That's the only way you can, I would say it's reliable, because if somebody said, okay, if this job is between 80 to 120, that is the range of the job. If the recruiter says we can only pay about 90 or 95, then that's a very live data point, right? So in terms of reliability, if you get inputs on the job salary ranges and for people who are involved in this process, I would say those are the only reliable ones.
Yeah. Okay. Very nice. I think this is a given. I mean, it's only as a guide, right? It gives you some advice, but really, realistically, you have to still see whether they are ready to pay, they are hungry for it. And above all else, I always say this, who are your competitors? Sometimes it's really not you. It's your competitor that make themselves so hireable, marketable, Okay, if you're on the contract and each contract salary was different because the roles are all different, what salary should this professional be asking?
That's a I would say, very unique situation. To be honest, I have not come across something like this where the salary might change based on the duration of the contract. But typically, like I said, your salary is linked to your last contract. So if it keeps changing, I guess one of the questions would be how much does it change? Do you go 5% lower, 5% higher? One thing that we have seen is that and I would say if this came to me in this case, I'd probably do a 3-year average of your last three contracts.
Good to know. Good to know.
Because if you're doing 5% in one plus and minus 5% in one or 10% in another one, look, if the salary is going up every time in contract, that's what you expect, right? We assume everybody's salary is going up by the market value, which is 4% in Singapore, 3.5%, 4%, let's say, right? I got 3% salary increase. I went from 100 to 103. If your salaries keep going up, I will basically take your last pay. But if it's like a zigzag, if it's going up and down, I'd probably take like a 3-year average and then use that to start to negotiate.
I think if we can get into a discussion mode, it will be so good. If the HR allow you to do that, why not, right? Like you keep yourself very open. Keep yourself very open. I think this is linked to the earlier question. How much pay increase should I ask for? This is one of the early bird question.
Okay, so I think there are two parts to this question. The first one is what is your market worth and what you're getting paid right now. If you know that your market, based on your experience, the kind of roles that exist in the market, they're paying 120 and you're getting 80, you can ask for 120, no problem. Okay, you can say this is what the market worth is. I'm being underpaid right now. That's what I tell actually a lot of the people I coach and I mentor, that if you're underpaid and you know for a fact, ask for your worth.
I like
Okay,
that. I like that. Based on your last job, like I accepted the job. I know that's the range, but I accepted, and I know I have a margin.
Correct. And we know for a fact also again that unfortunately our female employees get lesser pay than male employees, right? That's a global fact. So, and we know that also you're always linked to your last salary. I mean, that's traditionally how salaries are moved. It doesn't matter how amazing I am. I was getting 50, I get 70. Oh my God, that's amazing, right? Things are changing. So if you know your market worth, ask for your market worth. Then I would say that assuming your salary is not bad, right? And you think that 20% is a decent number, right? So I would say in a market like Singapore, again, it also depends on what level you are in. If you're more junior, it's easier to get big jumps. If you are slightly more senior, negotiating pay at more senior salaries becomes harder. Because there are not a lot of roles at more leadership level. These are big numbers.
The pyramid,
right?
it goes apex.
Correct.
Right.
So you might not be able to get a big salary increase, and that's where things like, okay, what kind of bonus plan you have? If it's a public listed company senior role, do you have shares? What other kind of incentives you have? So I think you get into all that negotiation. But if you know for a fact you're underpaid, ask for your market worth.
Yeah, that's why we all need friends in HR. Okay, everyone, please be nice to HR. I always say be nice to HR. And I think maybe they want to know, like, is it ridiculous or not? But I think you answered the question. Lower levels job, where you're not expected to take on a very senior role, then it could be expected that you can ask for. And I think 20% is what I would say is quite an acceptable jump.
Quite acceptable 20% is good. Given the budgets are 3 to 4%, 4.5%, right? If you get like a 20% increase, then that's not bad, right? I would also say for management roles, one of the things to remember is look at what we call the concept of total cash. I'll give you an example. You're working in a company where your salary is, let's say, $50,000. What they call the company bonus is 10%, right? So that's 5,000. You might move into a company where they might give you a higher salary, but there is no incentive. Or the salary might be same, but the bonus is double, right? So it's ultimately the total cash that you can take home. Think about that aspect and not just the salary. And
the country I work, even though here we are talking pretty low amount, but other countries, they could take upfront like 55%.
Yeah, correct.
It's gone already, right? Is there a signal that indicate that the company is the company hiring are open and keen to negotiate a package? Is there some kind of signal that you?
I think, like I said, if the first time a recruiter contacts you and you say this is your expectation, and if it's not a no, that's probably a good indication.
Yeah. If you, after saying your salary, they still talk to you,
then that means you're okay.
Okay. Yeah. Very nice. And then I think if they keep asking, is it negotiable? I think you take that as a hint already. Take that as a hint. Is this a must-have? I always think that those kind of questions are leading questions, right? And there's a question, the early bird question. What is considered? This is the last early bird question. What is considered competitive rate given the ongoing pandemic? And I'll add on the layoffs.
Look, a difficult question to answer. I would say market has moved quite a bit since the pandemic. So, like I said, all the things that I think Ali and I have shared in terms of looking at doing the research, talking to people, finding out, that is the market rate, right? So, and again, if you go, let's say you're looking for a marketing manager role, right? So, if you think about 20 roles that you saw, right? Assuming all roles were roughly around the same size, all of that, then you'll get an indication of what that role is. But like I said, it's not a clear answer. You look at, and again, like I said, the title is always misleading, right? A manager could mean anything. So you have to do your research from multiple angles, talk to people, find out where you can, look at industry reports, look at job sites, and then form what that is.
Are you familiar with the average salary increment, like rough percentage for FMCG?
Should be about 4% in Singapore.
Around 4%.
4%, yeah.
2 to 4%. Okay.
No, 4% is the average.
Oh, 4% is the average. Okay. Hard of hearing. Okay. Yun Ting, I think you got your answer here. Okay, I like Wen An's question. Is it appropriate to negotiate again on compensation package after giving a verbal acceptance, but before signing the contract? Is this done? If so, can this be done?
I would say probably no. I mean, I'm not going to say you can't do it, but it's not going to reflect nice on you, right? If the verbal offer is expected, you don't go back and say, "Oh, I want some more." It doesn't look nice. It won't portray you as a professional.
Unless there's another reason. Unless you
but I mean, if you've already negotiated over a period of time and you've made the verbal offer, I would say you can. Of course, nobody's stopping you. It just won't reflect nice on you.
Yeah. I think I just want to answer KK's question where you say if you are already 6 to 12 months jobless and similar roles as previous job are either paid lower and it's always on the last pay. If you don't take this lower pay, how to survive? Of course, I'm with you, KK. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. All our situations are different.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. And then the hiring manager, this one, can I squeeze in? The hiring manager is asking for your expected salary during the second interview. But in the first initial chat, he has provided a salary range that is below your expected salary. And you're willing to look at the total remuneration, including benefits and all that, instead of just monthly salary. How do you communicate this to the hiring manager?
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely nobody stopping you from sharing what your expectation is. They might have provided you, okay, we can only pay you between 90 to 100. If they do ask you what your expectation is, and if you feel that your worth or based on your research and everything, you want 110 or 120, please share that. Right? Again, like I said, we've been discussing earlier. Is that 110, 120 like a deal breaker for you? Like if they can't match it, let's say they can only pay you 100, is that a deal breaker for you? Or you might be like, then to your point, I look at the total remuneration package. I might agree to 100 if the role is amazing, if there are other perks, if the benefits are good, if there is incentive. But by all means, please do share what your expectation is.
Yeah, I think
and justify if you can why you want it.
I love that, and that actually should answer Nohani's question. She said when you apply, you give your salary expectation, but during the interview, can you ask for more? I think the straight answer is yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you're better informed now during the interview, right? Yeah, very, very nice. Any parting words?
I mean, I would say that again, nobody builds this expertise over time, especially if you're not in the function. It's not easy. I understand that. But I would also say that, it's really about awareness and doing your work. Like if you're obviously everybody wants more money. I don't think there's anybody who doesn't want more money. If you want more money, you got to build yourself to an extent where you can drive and you can ask for it, right? Ultimately, it's all about the what's your value, what's your brand name, right? Yeah. And nobody builds, no matter how amazing you are, nobody builds a brand name overnight. So you got to keep at it. You got to keep improving. You got to keep building it. And then, like I said, you get to a space, then, please do negotiate. There's absolutely no harm. If you know you're worth something, please ask for it. And like I said, ultimately, whether you negotiate, you come down, you don't negotiate, it's always your decision. But the more, like we use the word informed negotiation, the more informed you are, the more you'll be at peace, whether it goes your way or it doesn't go your way, right? This is a moving piece. So, but again, the more aware you are, the more research you've done, you'll always be happy with whatever decision you make. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you so much. You have shared so much with us.